Chapter 299, Henneler, 3. Kong. Entering the gates, the grandiose door soon closed shut behind us. Me name be Eluid Brick Pike, and I'll lead ye to the first level. Following the dwarf from before whose name was Eluid, we walked through a narrow tunnel that was lit up by multiple bioluminescent plants planted by the side of the walls. There be 4 different levels to the city, with each level differentiating by depth. At the moment we're currently going towards the first level, where the main city be located. Listening to Eluid speak as I looked around, I understood somewhat what he was saying despite his accent. In short, there were 4 levels to Henneler, each level dwelling more deeply into the mountain. Currently, we were headed to the first level, around 50 meters below the mountain and where the central city was located. From the second level onwards, everything be off limits. That be if ye value your lives. Below the second level were where the vault and working facilities were. Simply put, the temperature below was far too hot for regular beings to go. Therefore, unless you wore special gear, it was off limits. Most of the stuff Eluid was saying, I knew. However, I still paid close attention to what he said as I didn't want to make any mistakes. If there was one thing I've learned, it was that it was always best to have as much information as possible regarding a new location. As such, opening my mouth I asked. Is that so? By the way, I've been meaning to ask, is there anything I need to be wary of when going to the city? Like the areas I'm not supposed to go, and how I should behave myself? Huh? Good question. Eluid's footsteps halted. Stroking his long ginger beard, Eluid mused before shaking his head. Nay, in general, if ye dinna go below the second level, there will be nae trouble. Smack. Smacking the palm of his hand, Eluid suddenly remembered. Right, it's best to nae wander too much outside the city, as those pesky tunneling monsters will give ye a hard time. Monsters? I guess he must be referring to the beasts. Just because Henneler was underground, it didn't mean that it was safe from the threat of beasts. As long as I was in the city, there shouldn't be any problems though. Actually there be something else, but it's best if ye dinna know too much. Eluid's next statement caused my brows to furrow. Didn't this sound a little too ominous? Turning around, Eluid's tone became a bit graver. Human, it's nae that I dinna want to tell ye, but it's best if ye dinna know since you're nae strong enough to know. Had ye been stronger, I might have helped ye. All right, I won't ask. Squinting, I eventually nodded my head. Eluid smiled in response as he raised his hand and forcefully patted me on the back. Great, I'm liking ye more and more human. Or at least tried to, but in the end, he ended up patting my ass. I like dealing with people that understand their limits. That so. My mouth twitched, and I took a step forward. As I stepped forward, I suddenly heard weird noises coming from behind me. PFTTT. Turning around, much to my depression, I found the others holding onto their mouths with red faces. Evidently trying their best to suppress their laughter. You guys. Then, Eluid who was next to me chuckled and eyed me with a teasing look. Sorry there, does your arse hurt? This bastard did it on purpose, didn't he? I instantly shot a glare at Eluid, who burst out laughing and twirled his bulky hand in the air, nudging me to follow along. Follow me, we're almost there. I won't forget this. Glaring at the others behind me, I followed Eluid deeper into the tunnel. Before long, as we neared the ending of the tunnel, I could see the light coming from the distance. Squinting my eyes and passing through the end of the tunnel, a bright light instantly clouded my vision, prompting me to cover my face with my hand. Once my eyes adjusted to the light, staring at the scenery presented before me, I was left in awe. Whoa! I wasn't the only one that felt that way, as the others, too, had amazed looks on their faces as they looked at the city below them. Built inside the mountain, with small metallic pipes on the top of the hill to allow fresh air and light to seep through to the city below, a vast and bustling city appeared before my view. In the middle of the city, a great waterfall dropped through a hole at the top of the mountain, forming into a pool in the central square where a massive statue of a dwarf was erected. Besides the statue were many uniquely shaped infrastructures that ranged in sizes. However, though they were all different, the infrastructures brought me this strange sense of awe. From afar, they all looked like structural masterpieces, as each infrastructure was built to the most delicate of details, showcasing the dwarves' masterful craftsmanship. "This be as far as I can bring ye." Halting his steps, Eliud proudly looked at the city from above. Then, turning around, he slapped my thigh and laughed. "If ye manage ta trade successfully, with the money ye make, bring me ta have a drink." "Har har. Sure," I wryly replied as I massaged my thigh. Though he was small, his slap sure packed a punch. "All right, best o' luck, human." "Thank you." Staring at Eliud's figure disappear back into the tunnel, I let out a sigh before looking at the others. Had enough fun? Let's go. Was me getting slapped in the ass and thigh really that funny? I couldn't tell. Walking down a spiral of stone steps, we soon stepped into the city. The moment we set foot into the city, it was as though we stepped foot into a whole different world. With enormous infrastructures and bright lights illuminating the place, I could hear the raucous laugh of the dwarves in the distance. An overall joyful and cheerful atmosphere shrouded the city. Contrary to my expectations, grass and trees grew in the city, making the place look that much more stupefying. "Ren, where should we go first?" Small Snake tapped on my shoulder and asked. "Let's go find a place to settle down for now," I replied after musing for a bit. "Sure." Small Snake nodded in agreement. Although it looked like everyone was itching to go around the city to have a look, at the moment, the priority was to settle down and rest. Also, I needed to better understand the place before deciding anything else. Thankfully, the others were understanding and didn't fuss over my arrangements. "Wait, is that an elf? I also see an orc." On a side note, much to everyone's surprise, Henneler did not only have dwarves roaming the streets, as we could see orcs and elves roaming the place. I already knew this beforehand, with Henneler being the place where artifacts were sold and crafted. The fact that other races came here wasn't surprising. Though I did have to admit, the elves were a lot better looking than I had expected. Be it male or female, their appearance made me once again realize just how average I was in this world filled with handsome and beautiful people. Not that I was ugly. To make matters worse, I had only myself to blame. "Guys, wait for me for a bit." Walking for a further 10 minutes, I stopped by a couple of important places and directly sold some of the ores I had brought with me. I had to have some money after all. After trading some of the ores I had brought with me, asking the direction of the nearest lodging, we soon arrived in front of a certain building. "We're here. Rusted Hammer Lodgings." A sizable metallic sign hung on the wall of the building. To my surprise, it was written in human language. It was only after a while that I realized that it was actually not. The sign was in fact an artifact that would automatically display the words based on the language the viewer could speak. Pretty neat. Let's go in. Taking a step into the building, I urged the others to follow me from behind. The moment I stepped into the place, I saw a dwarven lady with thick black hair tied into 2 ponytails, holding onto a broom, and leisurely cleaning the wooden floor. Once we stepped in, turning her head, the dwarven lady exclaimed in surprise. "Oh. A human, haven't seen one in a couple o' days." Putting the broom down, she moved towards the counter. "Ye here for a room?" Did she just say that there were other humans in here? Did you just say that you saw another human? Though I had somewhat expected this revelation was a bit shocking. Leaning on the counter, the dwarven lady pinched her fingers together and nodded her head. Was a lovely guy, I tell ye. Even gave me a tip. So, ye here for a room or nay?
Ah.
Yes. How many? Looking behind me, the dwarven lady tippy-toed and tried counting. 1, 2, 6 rooms please. To make things faster, I just told her the rooms. Technically I only needed 5 since I wanted Small Snake to stay with Ryan, but the 6th room was for Angelica. Though, I wasn't really sure how that would work out. 6? That'll be 50 tansels. Tansels was the currency used in the dwarven domain, and in general, each tansel was equivalent to about 1,000 U. Therefore, the total cost was around 50,000 U. 50 tansels? Isn't that a bit too expensive? Although 50,000 U didn't sound like a lot, this was relative to the big things I spent on back in the human domain. 50,000 U was in fact a crap ton. My reaction was understandable. Flashing me a look of disdain, the clerk lady flicked her ponytail. Nay at all, have ye seen where we be? Just the fact that our place be coolerin' has fresh air makes up for the price. Right. Though her words had merit, in the end, I didn't want to argue anymore and so just gave up. Taking out a bunch of coins, I placed them on the counter. Fortunately, taking Eluid's advice, before coming here, I directly sold a couple in order to get myself some cash. This was the only reason why I could afford this place. Here. All right, please wait a moment. With a greedy look, scooting her small arm over the counter, the lady took all of the coins. Then, disappearing into the back, the lady soon came back with a smile on her face and tossed multiple keys in my direction. Your rooms be on the 2nd floor. I've put ye all together on the same floor. Breakfast be tomorrow morn, 7 a.m. human time. Thank you. Thanking the lady, I turned towards the others and gave them each a key. You guys understood what the lady said? Breakfast at 7 and our rooms are on the 2nd floor? As expected of the babysitter. Hey. You'll get used to it. I patted Small Snake on the shoulder. Looking towards the others, my face became serious. Enough said, I'm going to go now. Still got things to do, I'll come back in a couple of hours. You guys have a rest in the meantime. As I've said before, information was key. Going around this place without knowing the ins and outs was a no-go. As the one who brought them here, I had the responsibility of taking care of them. Couldn't expose them to too much danger. All right, I'm off. I'll see you guys in a bit. Waving
Goodbye
to the others, I turned around and left the building. /N, sorry if nothing much happened these past few chaps, but you know, have to try to build the world before anything important can happen. Chapter 300, Encounter 1.
Ha.
Hein finally let out an exhausted breath, sitting on top of a large bed. These past few months sure have been tough. Going from a regular teen who went to the academy each day and during the night supported his father's shop to suddenly leaving the human domain to constantly fight against beasts each day. Hein. Taking out his shield, Hein slowly started cleaning it. Compared to before, his shield was now riddled with scars and cracks. It was an ranked artifact that had accompanied him for many years. Yet, it was now reduced in such a sorry state that it could no longer be called a shield. Perhaps calling it a piece of scrap metal was more accurate at this point. Still, Hein wasn't disheartened. They were in the dwarven domain where artifacts lay everywhere. It was also about time he switched it for a better one. His shield was no longer as useful as it was back in the past. Opening his mouth, Hein softly muttered. Status. Then, a translucent table appeared before his vision. Status ========================================================================================================================Strength. Agility E+. Stamina. Plus. Intelligence. Mana capacity. Luck E. Charm. Profession. Tanker LVL.3. Martial Manual. Iron Body, Greater Realm of Mastery. A martial manual that focuses on reinforcing the bones and muscles of the user. There is nothing exceptional about this art, except that it trains the body to the utmost limit. The user will have the hardest and most durable muscles upon mastering this technique. Skills. E. Painless. Upon activating, the user will not experience any pain for a set period of time. Checking his stats, Hein had to admit he was on a whole different level compared to before. Not only did his stats improve drastically, but so did his martial art proficiency. This level of progression was not something he had initially anticipated when joining the group. Instead, he had expected to only reach rank in a couple of more months. Honestly, this rate of progression was shocking to him. Putting his shield down and taking out his phone, Hein scrolled through his photo album and clicked on the image of his father with his siblings. Dad, little ones, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well without me. Looking at a picture of his father and his siblings, a look of nostalgia appeared on Heinz's face. Never had he been so far away from his family throughout his whole life. This was the first time in so long that he had been apart from them, and even after 4 months had passed, he still missed them dearly. Every day, he would look at the picture and remind himself why he was on this trip. He would also record a small message to share his thoughts if he did not make it. It was a way for him to cope with the sudden change in his life. Was it perhaps silly? Maybe, but Hein didn't care, as this time was sort of therapeutic to him. Opening his mouth, Hein once again spoke. In all honesty, I thought that I was going to pair up with a bunch of weirdos in the trip. A wry smile appeared on Hein's lips as he thought about his other group members. When I first met Small Snake and Ryan, I thought that they were going to be baggage, but it turns out that the two of them are way smarter than I could ever wish to be. I was too arrogant. Ryan was a child, and Small Snake was fairly skinny with a low rank, and although he wasn't entirely wrong about needing to protect them, he only realized further into the journey how useful they were. Ryan was extremely competent at handling technology, whilst Small Snake was highly knowledgeable about most beasts and vegetation. Without them, the trip would have been a lot harder. There's also Leopold. That guy, I don't know what to say about him. I took him for a deadbeat drunkard when I first saw him, yet, I couldn't be any more wrong about him. He's sort of becoming a master to me. It was all thanks to Leopold that he and the others could adapt to the new world riddled with dangers. Not only that, but he was also the guy who taught him how to hold the shield properly and what to do and not do when fighting a beast. Without him, he would have probably have died many times over. There's also Ava. Man, what should I say about her? Recalling the first time he met Ava, Hein couldn't say that his first impression of her was that great. The first time I tried to speak to her, she could barely formulate any words. I had a hard time talking to her. However, man, did she change during these couple of months. Lowering the phone slightly, an envious and bitter look appeared on Heinz's face. Not only can she now speak properly, but man, she's strong. Her ability to tame multiple beasts at the same time is genuinely overpowered. Genuine bitterness could be felt in Hein's voice as he spoke. Ava's ability to tame multiple beasts simultaneously was truly overpowered, and he had witnessed it firsthand when he worked together with her. Well, on a good note, she at least works together well with me. It was also thanks to that ability that they found out that they worked well together. With her beast taming ability and his tanking ability, the two of them could now solo ranked beasts without breaking too much of a sweat. In fact, they could also probably deal with a ranked beast for a short period of time.
Ha!
Ava aside. You won't believe who the next member is. Her name is Angelica, and she's a demon. Shaking his head, Hein still couldn't believe it. A silly smile appeared on his face. You won't believe what face I made when I first discovered we were working with a demon. Honestly scared the crap out of me. Ava wasn't any better as she turned white as paper. If not for Ren, we probably would have passed out. Holding onto his forehead as though he had a headache, Hein let out a bitter laugh. Man, I swear. I'd say it took me more than a month to get used to her. She's one scary woman. But, still, I have to admit, she's really strong. Like crazy strong. Even now, the image of her defeating an ranked individual as though he was nothing was deeply engraved into his mind. After that day, Hein found a whole new level of respect for her. Lastly, there's Ren. Our leader. Hein scratched the side of his face. How should I start? He's really an enigma to me. Ren was truly someone who was shrouded with mystery to Hein. Even after spending 4 months with him, he couldn't understand him. Like, I always wondered, just how did he manage to recruit and bring together so many talented people? Wasn't he the same age as him? How in the world was he that resourceful? At times he's like this really nice guy that you can get along with just fine, but in other times he can truly be scary. Hein had witnessed Ren's dark side multiple times these past few months, and whenever he saw it, he couldn't help but want to run away. Chills would run down his spine.
Yeah.
And I still can't believe that he's the same age as me. Just how did he get so strong? Although he rarely moved, Hein was always left speechless by his strength whenever Ren acted. He was simply way too strong. His attacks were also scary, and in all honesty, he had no confidence in stopping his attacks. They were just too fast. Will I one day be like that as well? Hein wondered out loud to himself. Though he didn't outright admit it, a tiny part of him wanted to be strong like Ren. But he knew that this wasn't something that could have been achieved in just a few months. It probably took Ren a lot of time and dedication to get to where he was. Ren was a role model for him. Someone who he should follow closely and learn from. Wham! As he sat back, Hein suddenly yawned. Tapping on the screen recording, he once again yawned before muttering. I think this is enough for today. I'm too tired. Guess I should get myself some sleep. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Closing the recording and tuteing the phone away, Hein's eyelids started to become heavier. Oh. Leaning back on the comfortable bed, Hein slowly closed his eyes. For the first time in 4 months, he finally slept peacefully. 1 pint of ale, please. Sitting on a stool, inside of a busy and lively tavern, I looked at the clerk and ordered myself a drink. This being one of the most generic novels, dwarves acted as generic dwarves did. In short, they loved alcohol. Holding onto a white towel, and cleaning a large wooden cup, the clerk eyed me. Then, smacking the cup below a large wooden barrel, he turned the valve and a brown liquid slowly poured into the cup. Once the cap was filled, he smacked it on the table. "Ere your go." "Thanks." Taking the huge pint of ale, I took a small sip.
Ugh.
Taking a sip of the ale, my face grimaced. It was a lot more bitter than I had expected. According to what the clerk lady back at lodging said, the current tavern I was in was the most popular tavern in Henneler. Almost everyone in Henneler knew this place. Furthermore, it was also peak hour at the moment, meaning that it was the busiest time of the day. This was the perfect place to get as much information as possible. After all, you speak the most when you were drunk.
Ugh.
I really can't. Putting the ale down, I forced myself to not make a face. The ale was way too bitter for me. How was your day at work?
Ugh.
Tell me about it. All I've been doing today be hit the hammer until me hands turned numb. Silently listening to the conversations happening in the tavern, I tried my best to filter out the useless ones. This was a much harder task than I thought. The dwarves were just way too loud. Good thing we showed those bastards their place. Suddenly, a certain conversation caught my attention. Boisterously laughing out loud, and putting his little bulky leg on the table, a drunken dwarf raised his half-finished pint in the air. Har, 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 them bloody demons. We sure showed them a good time a week ago. I bet they be still pissing their pants at what we did to them. Besides him, another dwarf tugged his clothes and forced him down from the table.
Shh.
You're nae supposed to talk about it here. What be there nae to talk about? Everyone here knows that the demons be planning on attacking us. Let them know that we've already won the first exchange. The dwarf disdainfully replied. We show nae shy away from our achievements. Demons? My brows furrowed tightly. Did he just say demons? What was going on? Alveol. We're nae supposed to talk about it. It's military order. Pa. Fuck that order, I'm arg. Smacking the pint on the table, the dwarf named Alveol once again tried to stand up on the table. However, he, unfortunately, missed a step and crashed against a hooded figure sitting behind him. Crash! Dazed, the dwarf looked at the ceiling of the room. Getting out of their seats, the two other dwarfs tried to help him up. Oi Alveol, be ye okay? Ye be too drunk. Go away. Shoving the two other dwarfs away, Alveol glared at the black figure behind him and gave him a light shove. The fuck be ye doing? Without looking back, the black hooded figure silently drank his drink, completely disregarding the dwarf's presence. This obviously did not sit well with the dwarf, who stomped his foot on the black hooded figure's table and brought his face close to the hooded figure. Did ye do that on purpose? Did ye nae see that I was here? It had to be noted that the hot figure was definitely not a dwarf. The figure was twice the dwarf's size. The scene of the dwarf pushing the hooded figure was just too comical. Oi, be ye deaf? Did ye nae hear what I said? Once again the dwarf pushed the hooded figure. By now, the whole tavern had quieted down a little bit, and the two companions had long given up on stopping their friend. It wasn't because they couldn't, but it was because they no longer wanted to be involved with him. They were currently off duty, therefore they had nothing to defend themselves with. Ye still nae listening? Alveol once again pushed the hooded figure. Plack! This time, the hooded figure did not stand still. Smacking his drink down, he turned around and lowered his hood. I'm sorry, but can you leave me alone? His cold voice caused everyone to feel a chill run down their spines. I would like to drink in peace. For a brief moment, a terrifying pressure bore down on the tavern, making it hard for people to breathe. However, contrary to the others' reactions, mine was the complete opposite. Opening my eyes wide open, my mouth opened widely. Wait, isn't that? Chapter 301, Encounter 2. Wait, isn't that? The moment the black hooded figure removed his hood, I was left sitting in shock. The drink in my hand dropped on the counter, and my mouth hung wide up. How? I wondered to myself as I sat there in a daze. Hayek. In the meantime, the dwarf that was picking a fight with the hooded figure quickly sobered up and dragged his friends out of the tavern. He realized that he had messed with the wrong person. Staring at the dwarf that had just left, I turned my attention back to the hooded figure who once again covered his features with the hood. Standing up, I walked in his direction. "May I sit?" I asked whilst looking at him from above. Lifting his head, the hooded figure's cold voice rang through my ear. "Didn't I say that I wanted to drink and peek?" Mid-sentence, the hooded figure paused. His eyes widened a little bit. "You're also a human, so young as well."
Yeah.
I casually put my drink on the table. "So, can I sit?" "No, I still want to be left in peace." The black hooded figure still shook his head. Ignoring him, I still sat down and took a sip of the ale.
Ugh.
Bitter. The result was me putting on a bitter face. Seriously, the ale was just too bitter. "You have a lot of balls." "Not really," I murmured thoughtlessly. For the most part, I was a coward. Unless forced to, I would never do something that would end up putting my life at risk. If not for the fact that I was sure that the hooded figure before me would not hurt me, I would have never have approached him. Knowing the extent of my abilities, you still approaching me. Don't think that just because you're human, I won't touch you. He warmed. In response to his threat, I shrugged my shoulders. I'm not that stupid. Since you know, I'll give you 10 seconds, if you don't leave in that amount of time, I'll forcefully remove you. Putting his cup down, the hooded figure started counting. 1, 2. Eyeing the hooded figure from the side of my eyes, I lazily stood up. Pretending to be downcast, I muttered out loud. "Well, I just wanted to say that I used to be good friends with your daughter, Emma. But it seems like I'm unwanted." 3, huh? The man abruptly stopped counting. Then, standing up and grabbing me by the collar, his voice raised. "What did you just say?" His cold voice sent shivers down my spine. Still retaining my composure, raising both hands in the air, I replied with a slight smile. "Emma Rochefield, your daughter." "I know her." "That's right." The hooded figure before me was Emma's father, Waylon Rochefield, mayor of Ashton City and vice director of the Union. Pretending to keep a smile on my face, my jaws clenched tightly, and my eyes closed. Just the thought about that organization caused my blood to boil. For what they did to me, I was going to make them pay dearly, just like the monolith. Regarding Waylon, although he was part of the Union, I did not resent him. The people I had resentment with were the ones that decided to cast me out as though I was trash. Those guys. All I could tell them was to wait for me. Wait for me to come to clean up the place. Retaining his grip on my clothes, Waylon's eyes squinted. "You know my daughter? Can you let go first?" Then, tapping his large hands on my clothes, I spoke in annoyance. "Kinda hard to breathe." Realizing that his hands were still on my clothes, Waylon apologized and let go. Sorry." "It's fine." Fixing my clothes, I calmly sat down and looked at Waylon, who sat back down. Observing him from up close, I couldn't help but think. He sure does look like Emma. Handsome face, auburn-colored hair, and a perfect physique. No wonder Emma looked the way she did. Damned genes. Twirling his almost empty cup, Waylon suddenly asked. "Do you truly know Emma?" "MHM." I nodded and pretended to take a sip of my ale. I didn't actually drink it, though. Too bitter. "How can I tell that you're not lying?" "You can't, nor do I care if you don't." That was a lie. I actually did care, especially after I remembered that he worked for the union. A crazy thought hit me as soon as I saw him. What if I bring him to my side? Dealing a significant blow to the union with my current power was practically impossible. In fact, in the future as well. They were just too strong. But that didn't mean that it was completely impossible. What if I decided to grow a cancer inside of the union? Monica and Wayland. What if I somehow brought those two people to my side? What would the end result be? Just the thought threatened to cause the edges of my lips to curl upwards. Still, that was just a thought for now. It was all up in the air for how I was going to deal with them. You're right, I have no way of knowing whether you are lying or not. Here. Tapping on my bracelet and taking out my lock student ID card, I handed it to him. What's this? Taking the card, Wayland slowly started reading it out loud. Randover, 17, Lock Class A 25. Halfway through reading the card, Wayland stopped. Pretending to take another sip of the ale, I raised my brow. Believe me now?
Yeah.
Wayland nodded before passing the card back to me and asking. How is she? Is she okay? Is everything all right? At his question, I helplessly shrugged my shoulders. How would I know? You know damn well that I haven't seen her for months. Without portals, it took a long time to arrive at the Dwarven domain. Furthermore, the last time I saw her was like a year ago, and we weren't even that close. Right. Sorry, I got a little bit too worked up. It's understandable. Leaning back on the chair, I looked at the ceiling before opening my mouth. Well, I do know that her situation isn't the best right now. What do you mean? My words instantly piqued Wallen's interest as he leaned his body forward. Care to tell me what you know? Frowning, I thought for a moment before saying. Well, this is a few months old news, but your brother is making your daughter's life difficult. Before leaving the human domain, I had Small Snake send me information regarding the others to see how they were doing. Out of everyone I asked, Emma was the only one that seemed to be in a dire state. Her uncle seemed to have started making a move. This was much faster than anticipated, and even worse, it seemed like he was working with the Parkers. My brother? Wayland tilted his head.
Yeah.
Sighing, I explained. He's been trying his best to get Emma out of the lock and has also frozen all of her cards. So she basically has nothing. That bastard. Smack. Wayland suddenly stood up and smacked his hand on the table. His enraged roar shook the whole tavern, and not long after, the table in front of me broke apart. All eyes in the tavern were drawn towards us. But it seems like Wayland was too caught up in his rage to not realize this as he followed up. How dare he? A threatening aura slowly started exuding out of his body. Standing up from my seat, I quickly tried to calm him down. Calm down, hear me out before you do something stupid. Unfortunately, I was but an ant in his eyes. Waving his hand, I was pushed a couple of meters back. How can I remain calm in this situation? No, I need to tell the others that I need to go. Oi, at least listen to me before you go. What is it? Wayland asked as he turned around to face my direction. Just have a seat, and let me finish talking. Shaking my head, I tossed a couple of coins to the clerk and sat on a new seat. From how unfazed he was, this seemed to be a regular occurrence. Please. I motioned with my hand. At least let me finish before you go on a rampage. All right. My pleading, fortunately, worked as Wayland soon sat back on the seat opposite to him. Throwing him a grateful look, I thanked him. Thank you. I guess it's true when they say that all fathers are suckers for their daughters. Not that I wouldn't understand, since I probably would have also been the same if Nola was in the same situation. So, what did you want to say? Waylon impatiently asked. Scratching the side of my head, I opened my mouth. All I wanted to say was that you don't have to worry. Don't have to worry, you do know Oi, let me finish. Cutting him off, I glared at him before continuing. Although Emma is in a tough situation, I never once said that she was helpless. She got a lot of reliable people working with her to solve the problem. Your presence will do more harm to her growth than anything else. What do you mean? If you indulge your daughter, she's never going to grow. No offense, but your daughter is pretty spoiled. If you're there, she's never going to grow up and solve her problems by herself. If Emma never overcame any challenge presented before her, she would never grow. Although she had Kevin with him, it didn't mean that things would be easy. She needed to experience hardship to grow. I knew this best. Plus, a guy I know will help her out. Did you just say a guy? Waylon's eyes turned into two small slits. A wisp of his pressure radiated out of his body. He's a friend, I replied whilst looking away. Tell me more. Did I just accidentally sell Kevin out? I was putting on a good word for him in my defense. Well, Kiam, it's getting hot in here. No, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to switch the conversation. Who is the guy? He's my best friend? When I was trying my best to dodge the conversation, Waylon suddenly grinned. I'm joking. I don't mind as long as he truly is reliable, as you say. Sighing in relief, I seriously said. He's reliable. That I am sure of. All right, I'll trust your words for now. Smiling, I cursed inside of my mind. Trust me, my ass. It would take him months to get back in the human domain, and even then, there was a high chance that he would be in big trouble since he most likely had some critical work to do here. He had no choice but to trust my words. Now that I've answered all of your questions. Propping my elbows on the table and interlocking my hands together, I rested my chin on my hands. It's my turn to ask questions. Waylon leaned back and took a sip of his new drink. Right, it's only right that I answer some of your questions. Without wasting any time, I went straight to the point and pointed to a table not far from us. Where the dwarf from before sat. What is going on here? I heard the word demons being mentioned by that dwarf from before, and seeing how you're here, it seems like something is going on here.
Ha!
You're sharp, Waylon said as he put the cup down. At the moment, I, along with a few others, have been sent to the Dwarven domain to carry out some diplomatic talks with the dwarfs regarding artifact trading. Shrugging his shoulders, Waylon wryly smiled. Unfortunately, we arrived at the wrong time. Wrong time? My brows knit. Taking a sip of the ale, Waylon raised his cup and said. And that's because right now, the dwarves are at war with the demons. War? My eyes shot wide open. Then, I leaned forward with both hands on the table and urgently asked. Are you telling me that the dwarves are at war with the demons right now? Indeed, in fact, it's still in the early stages. Glancing towards his left and right, he whispered. Furthermore, to establish a good diplomatic connection with them, we have no choice but to stay behind and help them. You're most likely going to be dragged into the war as well.
Shh!
*T. Leaning back on my seat and massaging my forehead, I felt a massive headache coming. If what Waylon said was right, then I really might get dragged into the war. Not because I wanted to, but because by the time I left, I would end up facing thousands of demons at the same time. Talk about bad timing. Raising my head, I suddenly recalled a small part of the conversation. Wait, did you just say we? What do you mean by we? Nonchalantly taking a sip of his ale, an amused smile appeared on Wayland's face. Right, you mentioned you were from the loch, right? That's right. Placing the drink down and whipping the foam that was on his mouth, Wayland opened his mouth and said. Isn't that great? Your headmaster is also here. Chapter 302, Malval Ironhawk 1. The headmaster? My eyes shot wide open. The SS-ranked hero headmaster who never once showed up during my stay at the loch? Wayland almost spat out his drink. Giving me an odd look, he wryly smiled. Odd way to put it, but correct. My God. Leaning back on my seat, my brows furrowed tightly. Although I knew that Wayland and the headmaster were on a mission together, I didn't actually know that they were in the Dwarven domain. This was because Kevin back in my novel only went to the Dwarven domain after the conference that took place a couple of years from now. That was also the first time the two properly showed up in the story. Tap, tap, tap. Tapping on the table, I fell into thought. Who would have thought that he was here? The headmaster's presence makes things complicated. Although he wasn't there during the tournament, most likely he was aware of me. After all, there was no way Donna wouldn't have told him about me. Furthermore, as the headmaster, he was probably made aware of each death that occurred during that day. Explaining to him how I was still alive was going to be really troublesome.
Ugh.
How troublesome indeed. Do you have any other questions for me? Wayland downed the whole drink and smacked the cup on the table. He then proceeded to wipe the foam that lingered on his lips. Lifting my head, I nodded my head. Yes, one more. Go on, but make it quick, I'm supposed to leave soon. Wayland replied as he checked his watch. Leaning forward, I asked. Have you perhaps heard of anyone called Malval Ironhawk before? Sir Malval? An odd look flashed Wayland's face. Is there something wrong? From the look on Wayland's face, it seemed as though he knew him. With a complicated look, Wayland scratched the back of his head. No, not really, it's just that, he's, how should I say it? Stroking his chin, Wayland tried to find the right words to say. Let's just say that he's a very hard man to please. I figured. Leaning back on my seat, I let out a sigh. Malval was one of the few people that could handle Ocleum properly. He was a legendary craftsman. Without a doubt his standards for materials were high, and not just that, he was probably also very selective of his clients. In no way would he craft artifacts for whoever asked. But I still had to try. Even if he might reject me, I want to know. I wanted to get stronger faster. Surrounded by so many enemies, I had no choice but to get stronger. It was a must. At my response, a small smile appeared on Wayland's face. If you insist. Twirling his now empty cup, Wayland thought for a moment. Usually he's working at the 4th level, but you can find him on the 1st level from time to time. In fact, he's probably at his shop right now. Where exactly is that? Can you tell me the location? Sure, but I'll warn you beforehand. Don't expect him to make an artifact for you. No matter how rich you are, he won't do it unless he feels like it. Understandable. Like I've said before, if he just crafted for anyone, he'd have a line that would stretch all the way to the human domain. Pay close attention. Tapping on his watch, a holographic map soon appeared before us. To my surprise, it was a map of the whole 1st level. Wayland then pointed towards a certain area on the map. The shop is right here. If you follow this path over here, you should be able to get there in about 10 minutes. I see. My brows furrowed slightly. The map was a bit of a mess since wasn't an official map, but it got to the point. I now knew where to go. I have to go now. Putting his hood back on, Wayland suddenly stood up. Before he left, he tossed me a dark-colored metal plate. Before I go, take this as well. What's this? Catching it, I curiously asked. Pointing at the plate in my hand, Wayland explained. It's an identification badge. In case you want to meet me, you can just show them to the guards and they'll let you pass. Staring at the green plate in my hand, I gratefully looked at Wayland. I see, thank you. This might come in handy. No problem. Flashing a grin behind the hood, Wayland gave a slight nod. Have to go now. Thank you again for telling me about Emma. No problem. Recalling something, Wayland's footsteps suddenly halted. Turning around, he... Oh, right, if we meet up again, tell me more about that guy you mentioned before. Very curious about him. Sweat instantly dripped down my forehead. Sure. Good, good. Satisfied, Wayland turned around and left the tavern. Gazing at his back from where I was sitting, I closed my eyes and wished Kevin the best of luck. Looks like he really couldn't get out of this one. Leviathan Building, Lock. Every day at this hour, Emma and Kevin would train at the public training ground inside of the Leviathan Building. Not only was it bigger than their own personal training grounds, but it was also great for training with companions. Training with his swords in the middle of the training grounds, Kevin suddenly sneezed. Achoo! Kevin? Emma dropped her short swords and worriedly looked at him. Holding onto his nose and raising his hand to gesture to her that he was fine, Kevin wryly smiled. Nothing, I just suddenly felt a chill run down through my spine. Got a cold? Don't think so. Excluding the fact that colds didn't exist anymore, Kevin had been feeling good these days. His strength was progressing at an alarming rate. He had just broken to rank not too long ago. He was healthier than ever. It's probably just my imagination. He muttered to himself before once again raising his sword. Shaw! Slashing down, a beautiful yet deadly arc drew in the air. I'm feeling great, probably just my imagination. That's great. Emma sighed in relief before suddenly her face turned serious. By the way, Kevin, did you finally make up your mind? But at that moment, Kevin's focus completely scattered and he turned to face Emma. Regarding? Regarding what you told me not too long ago. That. Lowering his sword, Kevin's face distorted. Clenching tightly onto his sword, he softly muttered. I have decided to go through with the offer. A pity. A look of disappointment flashed Emma's eyes. Well, it's not like I can stop you since I also think that this decision isn't a bad one. I know, but... Kevin's fists clenched tightly. From Ren's death to Emma's problems. Kevin realized that he was still too weak. If only he had been more powerful, or had someone backing him up, of the problems would have ever occurred. Never again did he want to feel so helpless. Lifting his head and raising his sword, Kevin once again slashed down. Shaw! Joining the Union is the fastest way to make up for my shortcomings. With the city built directly inside of a mountain range, the only indication I got that it was nighttime was the slight chill that traveled in the air. Even then, it quickly disappeared as the thermal system built underground turned on, warming up my shoes, and the air around me. This should be the place, right? Lifting my head, I stopped in front of a fairly large shop. Compared to the other shops that I saw, this shop was the shabbiest looking one. Yet, despite it being the shabbiest looking one, it somehow felt like the most premium one. It was hard to describe. Was it perhaps its atmosphere? Or just my imagination? Wasn't sure, but I was just about to find out. The golden hammer. A shabby-looking insignia hung outside of the shop. Turning around and finally taking notice of my surroundings, to my surprise, I barely found anyone frequenting the place. It was as though everyone was avoiding the shop like plague. Clang! 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 The rhythmical, steady sound of metal being pounded was the only thing that indicated to me that I was in the right place. Taking a step forward, I knocked on the door. Knock. Knock. Hello? Is anybody here? No response. Knock. I once again knocked. This time, I raised my voice a little bit more, just to make sure that they heard me. Hello? Is there anyone in the shop? Clang. Clang. Strange. Yet again no one responded. However, the sound of metal being pounded was unmistakably there. Was he perhaps too into it? Maybe that was why he didn't hear me. Well, whatever. Shrugging my shoulders, I pushed the door open and entered the shop.
Ugh.
As soon as I entered the shop, a wave of hot hair brushed past me as the heavy scent of iron invaded my nostrils, prompting my nose to momentarily close up. It took me a couple of seconds to get adjusted to the smell, and once I looked around, I found myself inside of a nicely decorated shop filled with all sorts of different artifacts. From all kinds of weapons ranging from swords, axes, spears, and much more, to bracelets, and other different accessories were put on display around the shop. From a distance, I could tell that they were of a different quality. Come on, put more strength into it. I'm trying. Clang. Clang. As I was observing the artifacts, in the back of the shop I could faintly hear two voices. Turning my head and walking in the direction of where the voices were coming from, I curiously peeked from the side. And there I saw it. Steady your arm. Okay. Two dwarves fully focused on hammering a small piece of metal. Sweat trickled down the side of their faces, and their focus never left the piece of metal before their eyes. In fact, they were so focused that they did not notice my presence. Of the two dwarves, one was evidently older whilst the other was much younger. Furthermore, observing from the side, I could tell that the older one was trying to coach the younger one. Clang. Clang. No, nay. Harder. The SSA too soft. The older-looking dwarf shook his head in disappointment before pointing at a specific section of the metal. Idiot, ye did nae hammer this part enough. Look, the shape be aff. I'm trying, ye old bastard. Smack. Raising his hand, the older-looking dwarf suddenly smacked the younger-looking dwarf in the head. Who ye calling bastard, ye bastard? Oi, that hurts. Letting go of the hammer, the younger dwarf screamed in pain and held the back of his head in pain. This enraged the older-looking dwarf, who raised his voice. You idiot, why did ye let go o' the hammer? Because ye hit me. The younger dwarf cried out in grievance. Unfortunately for him, the older dwarf had no sympathy for him as he once again smacked him in the head. Smack. A good blacksmith can work under any conditions. Now look, ye failed. What a waste o' good materials. Covering his face with his hand, the older dwarf muttered out loud. What did I do to get such an incompetent disciple? Maybe if ye were nicer Tommy, I wow ye made it. Raising his hand, the older dwarf threatened. Oi, shut up afore I smack ye again. The threat seemed effective as the younger-looking dwarf instantly shut up and covered his head with his hands. Who be ye? Finally taking notice of my presence, the older-looking dwarf turned his head and looked at me straight in the eyes. Hey! I awkwardly waved my hand. Are you perhaps Sir Malval? Chapter 303, Malval Ironhawk, 2. It's me, but who be ye? Human? Malval picked up the hammer from the ground and tried to place it on the table. Seeing him struggle to put the hammer on the table, I moved forward and offered him a hand. I'll help out.
Ah.
Thank ye. What in the world is this hammer made out of? In hindsight, I probably should have thought this more thoroughly since the hammer weighed a ton. Even with my current stats, I could barely lift it. KHH, what is this hammer made out of? A lot o' bloody metal. Aren't you a blacksmith? How can you work with a hammer that you can't lift? Well, it's nae mine, it's me students. Bounded artifact? Yee. No wonder. Bounded artifacts were artifacts that could only be used by a specific user. If anyone else tried to use it, the artifact would not respond to any mana fluctuation. As such, unless held by the true owner, it was nothing more than a piece of scrap metal. An extremely heavy one at that. I'll hold it by its head and ye hold it by the handle. Okay, Put more strength in your hips, youngster. I'm trying. After struggling for what felt like an eternity but was actually more like a little less than a minute, we finally managed to place the hammer on the table. My God. I collapsed on the ground, completely drained of energy. Even if the artifact was a bounded one, to think that it would weigh so much in its regular state. Just how difficult was crafting it? So what did you come here for? Malval wiped his forehead that was filled with sweat. Standing up, I tried to introduce myself. However, before I could do that, I was quickly cut off by him. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ren, and I'm he. You're here to get an artifact, right?
Yeah.
It looks like he already knew my answer. He probably just asked out of formality. What type of artifact do you want? A sword. As I asked, my heart rate sped up a little. Most likely, I was going to get rejected. But I at least wanted to know the requirements for getting accepted. Malval pointed towards the front of the shop and said, "We have plenty in our shop, you can check them." I already have. And? I'm here to have a sword crafted rather than buying one. Crafted? Yes. An odd look flashed Malvin's eyes. Patting the hammer on the table, he sat down on a wooden chair and rested his elbow on the table. All right, show me your move. If he can intrigue me, I may be interested in forging ye a sword. That's it? Just show him a move, and if he was impressed, he would craft it? Didn't that sound a little bit too easy? At my expression, Malvin spat. What do ye mean the SSA it? Boy, let me tell ye this. I've seen all kinds o' swordsmanships. If what ye show me be nae something worth me time, I will simply nae make ye a sword. That makes more sense. For someone to be hailed as one of the greatest blacksmiths of the world, they had to at least have this much pride. Talk. Tapping on the table to get my attention, Malval warned. Boy, remember, just because ye helped me, dinna assume that it will affect me judgment. I'm very strict when judging. Never thought you would. Glad ye know. Taking out a random sword from my dimensional space, I rested it by the side of my waist. Typically I would never walk with a sword in my waist as it hinders my movements when walking. I only took it out whenever I was about to fight or was in a dangerous environment. Once I was set, lifting my head slightly, I asked. Just show you a regular move? Doesn't really matter. Preferably, a regular move. Big moves can damage the place. Whatever damage ye cause, it's on ye. Sure. Glancing at the room and realizing that it was filled with precious materials and artifacts, I decided to hold back on the major moves. Though I wasn't sure about what he wanted exactly, I was still planning on going all out. Hoo. Taking a deep breath, I placed my hand on the sheath of the sword and calmed my mind. Closing my eyes, I placed my thumb right beneath the guard of the sword. Ye ready? I am. I replied. Slowly extending my right foot back, I awaited Malvin's go-ahead. The wait didn't last long, as not even a couple of seconds after I spoke, Malvin gave me the go-ahead. All right, show me what ye can do. Click. The moment I got the okay from Malvin, almost out of instinct, my thumb pushed forward, and a silver streak of light shot out. What followed the silver streak was a subtle clicking sound. In a split second, I had sheathed and unsheathed my sword at incredible speeds. Once I performed one movement, turning my head, I looked at Malvin, who wordlessly stared at me with his arms crossed. How was it? I asked, genuinely curious and nervous about his evaluation. I had put everything in that one strike. I felt incredibly good about that one strike. Was what I did good enough to meet his standards? I wanted to know. The silence lasted for a brief couple more seconds before Malvin opened his mouth. His voice, sounding extremely disappointed. That's it? Huh. His words made me lose composure slightly as my heart sank. The unamused and almost borderline bored expression on his face was what did it for me. It was making me doubt myself. Was it really that bad? Was my swordsmanship that boring and interesting? Quickly recovering my composure, I looked back at Malvin and asked. What do you mean that's it? What I meant was that truly the best ye were capable o'? Yes. Although I didn't use any of my main movements, it would have made no difference to someone like Malvin. The fundamentals were there. I see. Standing up, Malvin let out a sigh before going back to the entrance of the shop. I followed from behind. Excuse me? What? So, did I fail? You dinna think? A trace of disappointment flashed across my eyes. Although I never had too much hope from the beginning, getting told outright that I didn't make the cut still disappointed me. Can you at least tell me why? I put my katana back and leaned on the counter of the shop where Malvin stood opposite. What was the problem with my swordsmanship? Though disappointed, I wasn't disheartened. I faced many failures in my life. One single failure or rejection wasn't going to make me lose myself. Rather, it was best for me to understand why I had failed so that I could work on it. Just because he rejected me now, didn't mean he was going to reject me again in the future. I knew that I just had to prove my worth. No knowledge from the novel could help me with this regard. Slightly glancing at me from the side, Malvin picked up an artifact and cleaned it. Before long, letting out a sigh, he opened his mouth. I'll do this because ye be young. Please. I smiled happily. Rolling his eyes, Malvin went straight to the point. Simply put, your swordsmanship be a mess. A mess? Ye probably only have just learned how to wield a sword nae too long ago, right? Putting the artifact down, Malvin picked another one and repeated the same process as before. As he cleaned, he eyed me from the side of his eye. Is me analysis wrong? No, you're correct. I bitterly shook my head. As expected of one of the best blacksmiths in the world. With just one glance, he was able to tell that I had only touched a sword for just around 2 years. You're nae bad for someone who just touched a sword for that little bit o' time. I can tell from your rank that you're talented, and that the swordsmanship ye practice be quite sophisticated, but... Malvin paused. Putting the artifact down, he once again picked another one and repeated the same process. Glancing at the artifact he put down and looking back at Malvin, I urged him to continue. But, though the way I was acting may come across as rude, his words were really enlightening me. It felt as though a new door was opening up to me. My impatience was understandable. Fortunately, Malvin didn't take my action to heart as he lightly shrugged. That's all there be to it. Ye just have a high rank, average degree o' science control, and a good art. In terms o' actual swordsmanship, you're pretty bad. Bad? I can bet that aside from that weird sword style ye use, ye've never actually trained with the sword properly. Never trained with a sword properly? What do you mean? My brows knit tightly. A part of me wanted to reject what he was saying, but another part of me, deep down, knew that he was probably right. With his attention on the artifact in his hand, Malvin lightly said. Instead o' focusing on the basic o' swordsmanship, ye've only focused on improving your little style, and completely neglected the fundamentals. Correct? You're correct. What he said was correct. I've only truly trained the keiki style, never actually trained in the basics of swordsmanship. Malvin shook his head in disappointment at my confirmation. That's wrong. Tossing the artifact back down, Malvin picked a new one. Although, I can also see that ye've put a lot o' effort in mastering scion control, but this ain't enough. Ye be simply wasting your talent. Closing my eyes, I didn't say anything and just processed what Malvin was trying to say. My mind was a bit of a mess right now, but what Malvin said was nothing but the truth. I had only been focused on improving the keiki style and my wind scion control, that I completely neglected to train the basics. Putting another artifact down, Malvin leaned on the counter. When someone asks me to craft them an artifact, I always tell them the same thing. Unless ye show me something that can truly inspire me to work, I will never craft an artifact for them. I understand. Opening my eyes, I took my elbows off the counter. Giving a light glance at the artifacts present in the room, and noticing their astronomical prices attached to them, I quickly gave up on buying them. Lowering my head, I thanked Malvin for his advice. Thank you for your advice. I will come back once I'm ready. Well, ye better be quick. I'm getting on with me age soon. Dinna make me wait too long. Sir. Why I. At that moment, just as I was about to leave the shop, an alarm rang out. Resounding across the whole city. Putting an artifact down, Malvin's face darkened. Hayes, the city be under attack again. Under attack? Again? Can you tell me what's going on? Malvin's words confused me. What was going on? Were the demons perhaps already invading? And what did he mean by again? I had many questions to ask, but Malvin promptly ignored them as she screamed towards his disciple upstairs. Oi, ye ungrateful bastard, tell the commander that I will be coming soon. Yes, master. The disciple replied. Finally turning his attention back to me, Malvin opened the door of the shop. Human, ye show probably go back now. Although we show be fine, ye never know what might happen. Can you at least tell me what's going on? We're under attack. The SSA. What's going on? Now go, the shop be closed. Okay. Seriously nodding my head, I took a step out of the shop. Clank. The moment I set foot outside of the shop, the door of the shop behind me closed. Not minding it, I quickly ran towards where the lodgings were. If the city was truly under attack, then I needed to quickly reunite with the others. They may be in danger.